I think the Bears are going to be in the background for like probably years on end now. Like I'll probably be doing virtual work from home. They'll still be back there, like
Okay,
when I'm working
so
at CFI.
You're gonna have an entire army
we
back
are
there.
now live streaming. Um, Welcome back to Senate. Welcome to our special session tonight on June 23rd. The session was called by a few of our senators to go over a resolution presented by Derek and Ben. I'm going to share my screen and have their resolution up. And then you guys can explain a little more.
All right, cool. Thank you, Kiru. So yeah, as you had just kind of introduced here, we did decide to put together a resolution and call a special session for this resolution. This resolution is basically highlighting a few issues that we have found relating to university policy when it comes to like reopening policy, but more specifically how it affects like university control over like the student activity fund. So y'all have probably had a few minutes to read over the resolution at this point, but just to kind of get the gist of what it's talking about and kind of give a little bit of backstory about where we're coming from here. So some student organizations, notably our organization SIGEP, had requested funds to attend a conference later on this summer. And we had reached out to Finance Board and they had said they would be willing to entertain this discussion, but we would have to make sure we got approval from the university. So we had reached out to university personnel back a few months ago, probably, I think it was late April, is what our emails were timestamped as. And we had gone back and forth for a little while and we didn't get a completely solid answer until kind of towards the end of May, early June, where the university basically explained that they would not permit us to attend this conference, or at least not support funding of this conference until after August 2nd, which would prevent anybody from attending said conference. That August 2nd date is what the university is referring to for general reopening guidelines and full in-person events and all of this other stuff. And as we were kind of proposing this resolution, there were a few things that we kind of took issue with this. We recognize that the university might have to set certain guidelines when it comes to travel and hosting in-person events on campus and all this other stuff. But of course, as the country is continuing to reopen and people are able to widely accept the vaccine, we found it kind of just a little bit hypocritical that we wouldn't be able to attend this conference, especially considering the university has no personal issue with us attending said conference. They don't have any specific issue with COVID or anything relating to anybody getting sick or COVID spread or transmission or anything like that. Simply the reasoning that we were given, and as we understand it, other organizations were given for their travel, was that basically there's kind of the spending freeze going on where the SAF, the Student Activity Fund, is not going to be spent on anything that is deemed non-essential, one of those things being travel. So as the resolution kind of outlines here, we kind of took issue with the fact that the university is basically trying to control how we spend the Student Activity Fund. And we've been in conversations with members of the university, and they've explained that the Student Activity Fund is supposedly the separate fund that is supposed to be controlled by the Finance Board, but it is still university dollars that they solely control at the end of the day. Which is something that we kind of took issue with, because as a student government, we are responsible for allocating, said funds, Finance Board, and all of the public documentation that is available, both in the student handbook as well as on the student finance website. All of this says that the Finance Board has sole control over how this fund is to be spent, and that the university is just responsible for executing said funds. So we kind of took issue with the university saying, we're going to control this student-led fund, and we're not going to let you spend this money how you deem fit. That being said, we don't take any issue with how Finance Board may or may not rule on certain things, or them setting their own policies regarding how they want the money to be spent. What we do take issue with is the singular autonomy of the Finance Board with the supervision of the Student Government Association with how that money is to be sent. or how that money is to be spent. So this resolution, as you can see at the end here, takes two specific resolved clauses. One, it does direct the Finance Board to no longer consider the university's COVID-19 reopening policy when allocating funding or budgets. So basically what this says is that Finance Board isn't supposed to consider what the university wants when it comes to funding things for the rest of this summer term, so until August 2nd. They should be able to fund events whenever they want, however they want. And then the further resolved clause basically talks about how the Senate, we as the Senate, rejects any outside interference from the university or any other additional third party on how we want to govern ourselves. We as the student body should have the sole discretion over how we spend a fund, which the entire student body is under the assumption is to be spent specifically how the Finance Board wishes to spend it. We don't want any outside influence. If we want to spend money in a certain way, we feel as if that the Senate and the Finance Board should have sole control over that fund with no outside influence taking part in that. And that's really what this issue boils down to, is whether or not SGA is a sovereign body away from the institution. And if we're going to allow the institution to prevent us spending our own money as we've been described to as separate from any other institutional funds. The other issue that's kind of alluded to in this resolution, but it's not directly called out, is the potential for where does this stop? If the university says in the future that they have an issue with how the money is being spent, that's where we're at right now. Perhaps in the future, maybe it becomes, oh, well, maybe we want to spend this money for something we want to do. If they have control over when we can't spend it, maybe they have control when we can spend it as well, and how they want to spend it too. And that's kind of where we're seeing, like, where does this line end up being drawn, and when do we put a stop to this? And we would rather be preemptive in discussing this matter rather than reactive at the end of the day. So in general, that's kind of like the overview of where we're coming from with this resolution. As I mentioned, we are definitely open to any friendly amendments or any questions or discussion. But like I said, that's kind of where we're at right now. So there we go.
Okay, thank you for that. With that, does Ben also want to say anything or not? Ben K. If not,
Yeah, I think Derek did a really good job explaining it.
okay, perfect. If not, since that is over, we will move into our 5-minute questioning period, where if you have a question, comment, or concern you'd like them to directly answer, please raise your hand and I will call on you. We are going to be starting with Ben Barber.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, what threats have Finance Board or Senate received with regards to limiting our independence in the process of allocating and dispersing SAF money? I haven't heard anything on that front, so I'm very concerned if we've been receiving threats that have said that our independence is going to be limited, and I'd really love some specifics on where that's coming from.
Sure. So what I will kind of discuss here is that the university, way back when COVID first hit, issued a spending freeze, basically saying any non-essential funds that the university spends, whether it's through academic departments or within the SAF, anything is going to just be completely halted. They're trying to save money. They lost a lot of money when students moved out of residence halls. So they said no more non-essential spending. Is going to be bare bones until the pandemic is over. Okay, so there is that. The issue that we take with this is that in every instance of public documentation available, the student activity fund is described as a fund that is supposed to be strictly held and handled by the Finance Board under the supervision of the SGA. The issue that we take with this is that if the university is willing to step in and say, oh, well, you guys can't spend your own money, what are they trying to do with it? The SAF over the last year has basically barely been touched outside of a few handful of things, a few Zoom licenses here and there, some Jackbox games, things like that. The SAF has barely been touched. So we know the money is still there. That's not the issue. The issue is that the university is exercising specific control over how the money is being spent, including relating to conferences and travel. Now, let me re-articulate this. The university does not care specifically about students traveling to conferences or events or anything like that. they relating to COVID, they only care about not spending anything on anything that they deem non-essential, which is the issue that we're taking with here, because they're limiting our access to our own money when we want to be able to spend it for the things that we want to do. This is not a finance board related concern. This is about the university stepping in and controlling money that ultimately is not really theirs to control.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Derek and Ben. I'm going to go to Fran. Do you have a question, comment, or concern for them?
Yeah, so I have like a bit of concern that it's like that this is kind of being like maneuvered in a form that like isn't really what it is. Like I think we have touched the SAF like a fair amount to still like accommodate for like not being able to travel and do these like more extracurricular things. Like that has been accounted for in like our discussions, and they're open to the public if anyone would like to come, or if you would like to like request the recording. But like ultimately like I feel like this is kind of becoming like a thing, like feeling like the school is controlling us, but I don't really feel like that's necessarily like the correct way of looking at that. Like ultimately, like I take concern with the fact that like these details aren't outlined other than like the SGA policies, and like the two other articles that Derek referenced in this resolution. But like it feels kind of weird to like call it that they're like controlling us ultimately, because like we can do things outside of this to like work towards like figuring out the like logistics of the wording that would provide us the authority to preside over the SAF in a more proper and formal way. But I don't, this resolution is just like going back on
Point of
yeah.
information. Is there a question?
Um, sorry, my question is, I guess, just like, do you feel like this is like a bit topsy-turvy, like versus like just being more straightforward with the administration and like talking more? I feel like Mr. Kilpatrick was very adamant about like opening up the school a little bit more for everyone to be able to come in. So I feel like there would be an opportunity to talk to him and other members of our like organization to like figure this out versus like
Sure.
yeah.
So I feel like I tried to allude to this in my opening pitch here, but maybe I didn't get directly to it. We did go through all of the proper lines of communication, all of the ones that we felt were appropriate in this matter, short of bringing this to the SGA's attention. So we did go directly to Finance Board. We talked to the Finance Board chair herself, who referred and said, hey, look, we're willing to entertain this discussion as long as you got the university's backing on this. So we went to the university. I went to the director of campus life. We talked to T, and then we also talked to Mike Gauze as well. He was at least copied on the email chains for these. And this was, these were the responses that we got, which, obviously we don't completely agree with, and we do take issue with the university trying to control these funds when ultimately they're supposed to be finance board related funds, which, if the finance board wants to set their own limits and set their own policies, we totally respect as students. But when the university wants to control how we spend our own money, that's where we kind of take an issue with that. So I don't really think this is topsy-turvy or really even that controversial. As a student government, we have a responsibility to ensure that the money that is rightfully ours is being spent in the way that we want to spend it.
Perfect. Thank you for answering and asking the question, Fran. Lucy, what is your question?
So I just wanted to clarify, because you said that from the university's perspective, they said that after August 2nd is when the SAF can be used for like in-person events as well. So is that like, I guess my first part of the question is like, is that true? And then is there any other like events that you know of, or like clubs that also wanted to use the SAF for like summer conferences, or is it only like SIGAP?
Ben?
Yeah, so I believe believe that's what Derek was mentioning. I believe it's August 2nd is when the university goes 100% back to in person, and that's the date we were pitched. We talked to a couple student org leaders, and there were some who did want to get funding, but they hadn't applied for it yet. Or there was one other that I believe I could be wrong on this, but I believe they did inquire about getting funding, but they were told that it wasn't available because of the current university policy. So as far as other student orgs, we believe that there's other student orgs that would like to travel, and we have a ton of student orgs on our campus, many of which, are centered around activities that would heavily involve travel. So we have reason to believe that student orgs could take advantage of the SAF to travel even during the summer. And yeah, just our main issue is not the fact that the university has the COVID policy. Our main issue is the fact that finance board is being told by the university that they're not allowed to allocate funds to student orgs that want to use it.
Okay, thank you. Alec.
Hey, so I just wanted to speak on it a little bit, both in defense and kind of in questioning what this proclamation entails for how the process will go down. But first, I'd like to speak on the behalf of the Greek life organizations on campus as well as clubs. There are many
I have a
organizations.
question.
This is a question, but this is a lead up in format.
Oh, okay. Just clarifying. Sorry, it didn't seem like it was going down.
No, that's okay. That's why I wanted to state it beforehand that I would talk and then ask my question. But yeah, I'm a little bit poor wording. That's my part. Many organizations, Greek life as well as clubs, look to find new experiences as well as regulatory experiences that are beneficial to both the Greek life and the club's success and their advancement in their own experiential learning. And so as the school would claim they're unnecessary, travel, especially under these circumstances where our state is opening up more, we are restricting ourselves when we really don't have the need to. And so these organizations such as SGAP, and I know personally that SGAP's going to conclave, we are asked to bring up 2 representatives each. And with every Greek organization, they have a similar process in which they all attend a large gathering in order to convene and talk about issues within their own organizations. And without that outreach and connection, there is a loss in potential growth that the school is limiting through their short-minded decision in the thought that they are somehow, well, not somehow, but in the fact that they are more interested in the health of the students. They also don't consider that they are also taking away from the students. And what I was wondering after that little informal was that if this bill is to go past, would this bill be a direct statement that is then put into place and is set in stone, or would it then have to go through the school's administration and be approved as a bill that came from here that they can then deny?
So I can pretty much specifically address this. At the end of the day, I mean, this basically articulates what finance board policy would end up being, at least the first resolved clause does. In essence, it says the finance board is supposed to only focus on what they want to consider. It's not supposed to be affected by any sort of COVID-19 university reopening policy, anything like that. It's strictly supposed to be handled by what the finance board wants to do. But that being said, the university could, just not sign the check for whatever conferences or events or anything in person that they want to do, that these student organizations so desperately want to do over the summer. And here we go. But again, this is really just about hammering in the idea that SGA is supposed to be independent of the university and be able to do what we want to do as an organization. We exist as an organization to speak for the students and do what the students want to do. And if we're not able to do that, there really isn't much purpose for us being an organization if we're not able to articulate and represent effectively what the student body wants to do and how to spend their own money.
Okay, thank you for your question. We'll go back to Ben Barber.
I just wanted to clarify. So you've sort of said that the university is improperly interfering with finance board decisions. What finance board approval has been overturned by the university in the last year? What initiative, what conference, what event did finance board choose to fund that the university then said no to? Or is this more just finance board has chosen to respect the university's goals and has therefore been funding in line with university goals?
So I think that
Oh.
question was framed in such a way that was kind of that kind of backs us into a corner, intentionally backs us into a corner. The way the question was framed, you're kind of implying that basically the finance board has to have specifically heard a case, granted a case, and then the university outright denies it. It's kind of an ordering issue, if you will. The issue that we have is that we went to the finance board to seek advice, and the finance board basically gave us the advice and was giving other student organizations the advice saying, you cannot attend your conferences until we won't even entertain this discussion until the university backs what you're trying to do, which is why we went to the university to try to get their support for these sorts of in-person conferences, in-person events, those sorts of things. And the university has been simply not willing to entertain this. And that's kind of where this issue becomes an actual issue, is because the university is trying to overtly limit how we want to ultimately spend our money. And I think Ben might have wanted to contribute a little bit more on this.
Yeah, so I guess, yeah, the specific example, it wasn't an approved funding request, but it started with us, SIGAP, trying to get funding for our conference that we want to go to. And we, as Derek said, we went to Finance Board. Finance Board said they would be open to funding it as long as we got university approval. And we went to the university, and the university said, no, we're not going to approve funding. So while it's not procedurally the university blocking funding, it's in effect the university blocking funding.
Okay, with that, if we do not have a motion for extending time, it will be time to move to our discussion period. Okay, there's a motion. Needs a second. Thank you. We will extend that to 10 minutes. And Juan, what is your question?
It starts with a little bit of a preconception here, but assuming that this
point of inquiry, is this a discussion or a questioning period?
This is a questioning period still.
Okay.
perfect. So I'll just jump to the point. Assuming that this does pass, how would this positively set a precedent going forward if the university was to say not sign the checks for going to said conferences or whatever happens after?
So a couple things kind of go on with this. First of all, we as student government get to say right here and now, we're not going to basically take this sort of outside pressure bullying from the university saying, we're not going to allow you to fund your own events or fund your own conferences or anything like that. We're saying the SGA is independence, even if at the end of the day, the university is not going to sign the check for a lot of these events or anything like that. It takes the blame off of SGA. We're not responsible anymore. If a student organization comes to us and say, we want to go to a conference, we want to, host an in-person event, we want to do this thing, and the universe, and we say, yes, you can, it takes the blame off of us. It's not our responsibility anymore. It is the university's. Now, even going beyond just this one specific example of the university limiting our spending as it pertains to COVID, this is going to help us with any other issue in the future, because if the university tries to limit our funding, we can go on and say, hey, look, we've proclaimed ourselves as independent. We have legal agreements with the university that state that student government is specifically independent of the university in our operations. And when we go about saying this, we're able to say, look, we're not going to take this bullying. You're not going to, say how we're going to spend our money. We get to choose how we spend our money. And we're actually representing the student body the way that we're supposed to be doing. That's what we're getting at here.
Okay, thank you for your question, Juan. Fran, do you have another question?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to ask about um the way you kind of reference. I'm sorry, I lost it. It's okay.
Okay. If you think of it again, feel free to ask it at any time. With that, we still have 7 minutes left of question time. So if anyone else has questions, Devin?
Yeah, so you say the issue is you don't want the university having control over the finance board, but you even admit that the university still would have final say over all decisions in here, since it is them controlling the money and whatnot. I guess the biggest issue I have is it almost seems like you're trying to establish control over something, even though you will not actually have established control over it in the long run. All this is doing is butting swords between two groups that is just going to piss both sides off more. And I'm having a hard time seeing, because obviously the finance board guidelines were not created in a vacuum. The finance board guidelines, as they currently exist, were done in collaboration with the university. The university has purchasing rules that we have to abide by. And I'm kind of curious why, I mean, why you needed to completely disassociate the finance board from the university purchasing process rather than trying to go about this another way, I guess is kind of what I'm getting at.
Sure. Totally get where you're coming from there. And ultimately, when we're the student government, what we represent first and who we represent first is the student body. Obviously, we want to make sure that we have a good working relationship with the university in areas that it matters. But also at the same time, our interests are not with representing the university and being the face or the spokespeople of the university. Our interests are to be the spokespeople of the student body. And we recognize that although this resolution might not specifically get us that money at the end of the day for for our events or for any other student organizations that are looking to host an event or go to a conference or anything like that, this basically establishes we are independent of the university. We have the sole control over the SAF, the finance board. We get to do what we want to do because we are established as a separate organization. In their own writing, they've admitted this as well, particularly in the student handbook and in the student finance website. This is not us trying to pick a fight with the university. This is basically a knee-jerk response to what university policy is, saying, you're not going to be able to spend your own money. We take issue with that, and we're saying we don't like you controlling how we spend our money. Again, not trying to pick a fight here. This is just in response to what we've been told by university policy.
Okay, thank you for that, Devin. Fran, did you rethink of your question?
Yeah,
Or a new
I
one?
just kind of, sorry. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to like ask the difference between kind of like we do go hand in hand ultimately with the university. It's the way that like our accounts are set up. It's the way that we currently are fundamentally. Um, and I mean, even I would like to approach like having a conversation about this, but I feel like what is the differentiation between like this knee-jerk reaction, as you like called it, versus like having a conversation and like investigating deeper with the administration on like how we can like clearly define this, not only in the student handbook but in some kind of like legal documentation that would like provide us like in the form of like some kind of trust in the SAF.
So you're asking what the difference is, just to clarify?
Yeah, basically, yeah, exactly. Like the knee-jerk reaction of a resolution like this, as you called it, and like going through like what would be a lengthy process for finding a legal, like just like a legal way of like us providing over the money.
Well, I would sit here and I would argue that the basic difference between the two is that we've gone out of our way as a legitimate legislative representative body of the student government to put forward this resolution saying that we are the representative body of the student government, saying we want to have control over this money. Historically, we have always had control over this money and how we would like to spend it. It really only became a problem as of within the last year or so, when the university decided that they weren't going to allow funding for certain things as it pertains to in-person events and stuff like that. The bigger issue that we're having with this particular thing is that this is no longer relating to COVID. This is just finding one particular date that they said, oh, well, we're going to let you, fund your events after this date, which it just feels very arbitrarily chosen. And we understand that, like, the university, if we're going to have a fund, we're obviously going to have to have a method to collect, the SAF and whatever. And we're fine with the university having control over those accounts. Historically, they've always had control over those accounts. But what we want is that if finance board wants to fund something or, put money into some place or, into some events, we want them to be able to respect that and say, you know what, that's totally cool with us. No problem. You go right ahead. But it is really highly suspect of the university to say you can't spend your own money when there is plenty of it sitting there. And Rachel, I know I saw you had posted something a little while back saying that, like, over the last 6 months, we spent, $100,000 of the SAF, which is phenomenal. But over the last 6 months, the SAF collected about $750,000, roughly speaking. So we didn't get to spend almost, $650,000 over the last 6 months that we could have been spending on other things if the university was allowing finance board to fund certain things they wanted to fund.
Okay, thank you for that question and response. Nick?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm just curious, so you're asserting that, like, this is an unprecedented, like, power grab by the university itself when it comes to, like, restrictions on SAF funds. But I would assume at least that, like, there's other restrictions that normally we just don't run into. For example, the university would have to comply with, like, Title IX when it comes to SAF funds and things like that. So what makes this regulation of no funding orgs because COVID until this date, how's that different from any other restriction that is on place? Because my understanding would just be that this isn't, like, unprecedented.
Ben?
Yeah, so the reason it's unprecedented, like you said, with Title IX or any other actual, city ordinance, state law, federal law, those are actual laws that the university legally has to follow. But as of right now, COVID restrictions in Illinois have been lifted completely. COVID restrictions in many states across the country have been lifted completely. The vaccine is freely available. There's no law on the books that the university is complying with by restricting our ability to fund.
Thank you for that. With that being said, our 10-minute is up. Unless there is a motion to extend time again.
Am I allowed to, like, a point of clarification? It's not like a question about the resolution specifically.
Motion to extend by how long, Devin? Sorry, give me a second, Lucy. 10 minutes, second. Perfect. Yes, now you can.
Okay. So, because I don't know about you, Ben, but for Derek, I know, like, you're in SIGEP, and, like, I feel like that's, like, a motivator for, like, why you wanted to make this resolution. So my point of clarification is, like, if someone in a club that wanted to do go to an in-person conference over the summer and they weren't an SGA, like, would they be able to bring this resolution to the Senate, or would they have to, like, get someone from the Senate to, like, make the reservation, or I mean the resolution?
Only voting members of the Senate/senators or members of the exec board are allowed to bring forth resolutions or constitutional changes or anything like that.
Thank you.
So no, they would not be unless they.
If I could add one more thing just to clarify, there is technically the General Assembly of Students, which on its own does have the authority to do almost everything that the Senate does, including, I would assume, bringing forth a resolution such as this.
Yeah, they would have to bring it to the General Assembly, which is ran by President Ben Barber. Devin, what is your question?
So, kind of going off of what Nick mentioned earlier, obviously this is not the only regulation that IIT has to put up with in response to allocating the student activity fund. Obviously, I can understand the frustration here, and I can entirely understand your frustration with wanting to submit things in irregardless of the current COVID state that the university has put. And I have no problem with the first resolved statement on your proposal that basically says, hey, please stop using this antiquated COVID-19 reopening policy. However, what I take problem with is the second further resolved, whereas you are basically saying, we are entirely separate. We will no longer be taking any sort of input, any sort of collaboration, nothing with the university. This is entirely up to us. So I'm really just kind of curious why you felt the need to be able to extend that authority all the way up to complete control of what is essentially the university's money in the first place. Why you need to establish such a hard line of control, because I feel like there should be some kind of, at minimum, collaborative effort within the university, since they have their own rules that they need to be implementing in finance board as well.
Okay, definitely. Thank you for that question. I think I identified two parts to that question that I'd like to address. First of all, as it pertains to like that second further resolved clause, if you will, we're not trying to completely sever ties with the university. The specific line that this references is that the Senate categorically rejects any threat to the established independence of the SGA. And any threat might be pertaining to, the university trying to influence how, finances are allocated, or, influence judicial board decisions based off of, personal grievances or, perceived bias or anything like that. Or, any decision that the Senate might be making, any influence that the university might have in regards to, those specific bodies making, that's what we might take issue with. But that doesn't mean that a committee of SGA working on a project with each other is going to be completely separate. What we're talking about here is that the student body first has to be represented before we represent the interests of the institution specifically. The second issue that I'd like to address as it pertains to your statement here is that we as the student government, and we as the finance board, at least overseeing the finance board, it is ultimately our money, and we get to choose kind of how we want to spend that. And that doesn't mean that the finance board doesn't have a little bit of oversight as it pertains to maybe other legal entities like Title IX or federal regulations, state regulations, things like that. Even as a separate institution, if we were to go full on 501c3 and we decided to be our own nonprofit institution, we would still have to comply with all of those different mandates, whether or not we were associated with the institution. So we're not talking about the finance board, coming out here and getting to start their own, illegal business or something like that. But what we are saying is that, the finance board should be able to make some of their own decisions without the outside influence of other policies that they may or may not agree with.
Okay, thank you for that. Fran?
My hand is still just up from earlier.
My bad. Nick?
Yeah, thank you. So I guess I would like, if possible, for one of you to draw like a bright line. So you've described the COVID policy of August 2nd has been described multiple times as like antiquated, out of date, not in touch with like current vaccination rates and things. So could you tell me like when the COVID policy became so out of date that like we could ignore it? Like when IIT's policy became so like out of step with the situation on the ground?
Yeah. So I would like to kind of backtrack here, and this isn't really backtracking, but it's just reflecting on what we were discussing a few minutes ago. This resolution has absolutely zero to do with COVID-19 tracing or anything of that nature. We're not talking about, whether or not the university is concerned with, positivity rates on campus or anything of that nature, because in writing they have said they don't care whether or not the universe or whether or not students are going to specific conferences or going out of town, traveling, whatever else. They just will not allow the SAF to fund it. What we're talking about here is that the general COVID-19 policy was an overall overreach as it pertains to limiting how the SAF is being spent. We want to differentiate two things here. If the university wants to control their own money, within their own departments or within their academic departments or, campus life or, the finance department or anything like that, event services, whatever, that is totally their call, because ultimately all of that is their own money. But the student activity fee in every single instance of public documentation available is supposed to be strictly handled by the finance board. And if we don't have that, ultimately, what authority does SGA even really have if we don't recognize that this is supposed to be separate funds, separate money, separate power from what the institution already has? The COVID policy at large was not specifically an overreach, but how it affected the SAF and how we're able to spend it, it was. So if the university wanted to limit, in-person events on campus, obviously those are their own facilities, things that they have funded with their own money, totally understandable. But if there was an off-campus event somewhere downtown that the SAF wanted to fund that was not within the university's jurisdiction, and they were limiting us being able to spend that, that is where we would take an issue. It's because the university is stepping in and controlling something that ultimately they really have no direct authority over. That's where our problem is.
Okay, thank you for that, Ben.
So this would more be a question for Chloe, Fran, or any of the other finance board advisors in attendance tonight. How does finance board feel about this issue? How limited in their decision-making has finance board felt in the past year, given the COVID guidance? Does finance board feel like they have been constrained by the university in their spending and their allocation decisions?
I'd be down to speak.
Fran.
Chloe, do you want to go? Sorry.
We'll start with Fran and then go to Juan.
Okay. So for me, like, I don't really feel like there's been any direct specific like limitation other than a COVID like restriction, which has just been like how we've been going about trying to keep the student body safe, and just again following along with the school's policy, because ultimately they are our like presiding like governing body, and so they're able to provide for us in terms of being able to develop an SAF fund, right? So like they're not trying to limit us in any way other than like specifically something about COVID. So this August like 2nd date has become this thing where um like Mr. Kilpatrick, I think it's Professor Kilpatrick, was here the other day and like gave us a whole little spiel about what's going on with the whole COVID. And he told us that ultimately like we're waiting for like 75% or more. I don't like August 2nd is the date that they chose, but like no limitation has been made on like any kind of spending other than like specifically like travel. Like there isn't anything like other like things that are non-essential that are being removed other than like mostly specifically travel. We're still funding conferences, we're still funding like virtual things, we're still funding like local competitions that people can do. It's just not like direct travel across like many distances.
We'll go to Juan then.
Well, I cannot speak for every single member of the finance board, but I can speak for myself and what I believe is the general posture. Most of us have voted previously to most of the budgets in accordance to what the university has told us is the best course of action. We, or I at least personally, believe that the university has the best interests for its students. We have voted no to a certain amount of budgets, but it has not been a coercive decision by us, guided by the university. It has rather been something that we truly believe is for the best of every student and their well-being. With that being said, we would personally take positively going forward with this budget in question. What I do believe is that, is it really something positive to go against the university in this moment? Is there any other way we can go about this? I don't know. I think that would be worth exploring, but I don't know the entire background to the situation.
Okay, thank you for that. And then Naeem, before I get to you, I will have Chloe speak.
I'm just gonna talk because it's a little easier. So just some background clarification. All the decisions that we have made on finance board this far for any budget related to the pandemic during the pandemic was based mainly on local guidelines. Earlier on in the semester, when things were starting to get back and people were at school and whatnot, we decided as finance board, because we didn't have any guidelines from the university, they weren't really, I mean, I don't know if that was just like communication kind of falling through, but we weren't told this is what you have to follow. So as finance board, we said, hey, we voted on what we wanted to follow, and we said we were going to follow local restrictions and guidelines. Essentially, that ended up kind of just aligning with what administration did anyways. So we didn't really face any issues with any oversight from admin. The only issue we're facing now is this weird overlapping period because technically the things are opening up now, but the university wants to remain restricted until August 2nd. So it's this like couple week long period that maybe our policies are not aligning. But then again, we haven't had a budget yet. Any of the communications that I had made previously were based on the past semester and not really looking into what was going to happen over the summer. So this is like a little weird gray area now. But overall, there haven't been many issues.
Okay, thank you, Chloe. Naeem. We'll do Naeem as our last question, and then we will be moving into our discussion period.
Okay, so I just really want to ask, really for a point of clarification here, just so that I know I have the correct interpretation of what's going on here, because I just want to ensure that I've got this correct. So all other COVID policy aside, the university has decided to make August 2nd the day the sun comes out and the university comes back to normal, and we're able to resume normal procedures, operations, so on and so forth, policy, etc. And the problem that this resolution addresses, just so that I'm clear, is that organizations who wish to still conduct their summer plans and meetings and any sort of travel that may require SAF usage are barred just because the university has said August 2nd is the day that the sun has come out, and that's just the only reason. Is that correct?
I don't know who specifically you were asking, but yeah, as far as I understand, in writing, the university has said they don't care about whether or not people travel or go places. They're not going to test. They're not going to mandate any quarantining or anything of the sort. The only thing they care about is limiting non-essential spending, and that date will be lifted on August 2nd. Which again, want to articulate, SAF is separate from everything else in the university.
Yeah, can I clarify one thing? So there will be quarantining. it will be a little bit different for international students. So I don't want to say there's going to be no quarantine, just because a lot of international students haven't had the ability to get vaccinated yet. But there's going to be, I don't really know because I'm not working in housing, but there will be some amount of time I think that will be offered where we'll get students vaccinated, but then they'll be able to quarantine. So there will be some sort of quarantine, something. And I did not make these decisions, so I'm not sure. But the only thing that I know is August 2nd is the date. It's the date that faculty and staff are required to be back on campus as well. So it is not only for students, it is for all university personnel. Now, I'm guessing, but I think that this date was chosen because it is the end of that semester, of that session DE, one of those semesters. And they had to make a call for the summer on what course classes would look like. And remember, things were looking pretty dismal, even in like April still. So I think because of that, they had decided that everything would still be, kind of online, similar like it had been in the spring, though things had started to open a little bit more. Oh, sorry. Monday, session B. Thank you, Ben. I'm in session C or D. I don't know. I should know, but of course I don't. It's not great. You can see how my summer class is going. But so that's kind of the idea. I can get more clarification about why that date was chosen. That's just the idea that I had come up with, and why they had possibly chosen that date. If that provides any context, I'm not sure it does.
Perfect.
Right. Just to end off my question, the question I'm just asking is, the problem that this resolution is attempting to address is that, this date aside, orgs and in general, I guess SGA and Finance Board should be able to get student orgs the money that they need to conduct at least some summer activities before said magical date. Is that correct?
I'm going to pass this one off to Derek.
Yes, that is correct, Nate.
Okay, thank you. That was all.
Perfect. In the interest of time, I'm going to move us into our discussion period, which I'm sure is not going to be 5 minutes. But if you have any questions, comments, or concerns at this point, you can now raise your hand and freely discuss. Starting with Chloe.
Point of information.
I'm gonna hand down. That was an accident.
Oh, my bad. Yes, Derek.
Point of information. There needs to be a motion to approve the resolution.
Oh, my bad. Second. Okay. Anyways, so now we're in a discussion period. Fran, we'll start with Fran then.
So I guess just to kind of talk, this is discussional period, like.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Good. So basically, I kind of want to define out the fact that ultimately we are tied to the university. Currently we don't preside over any kind of trust or account that would specifically give us the ability to say what happens with that money. Currently, from what I would understand it as a person, as an advisor on finance board, would be that we have sole authority on the 3 documentations that we have present, that we're able to say what happens to that money ultimately, but that we're not the only one who can say no, what doesn't happen with that money, which is for me in the form of a trust. That's essentially how it would work in a legal manner as well. The university, because it's our governing body, would have some type of authority over us because we are students at its organization. Same thing goes with SGA. We were going over that point earlier that ultimately it feels like we're chasing something here that we're not going to be able to really change. It doesn't really feel like this moves us forward versus just being able to clearly and legally define when we can and can't use it. But I feel like this issue is really being brought up because of this COVID type of situation. other than that, I don't really understand why this is I guess coming into a conversation without like again in the form of like SGA having a bit more of conversation with like our faculty. I mean, I had a conversation with Mrs. Rachel today, and it was wonderful. I feel like we really got somewhere. And I really only took about like an hour of my day to kind of walk it through. I feel like with enough like time, we could have reached the president, or sorry, the dean, and kind of like figured out where we can like withdraw those COVID policies, because obviously that would be an outdated policy if August 2nd is far enough away that their current policies at this moment don't reflect that date. I would agree with that, but I feel like this is the wrong like form to go about it, whereas this seems like a COVID like restriction issue across campus, because it's not just like travel that we also have like in-person events. So it's like if the entire campus as an SGA body would like to like talk about this COVID issue and pull it back, I feel like that's a much better opportunity to like observe the power that we're able to communicate with the school versus like this again knee-jerk reaction. So thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you. Next would be Derek.
So I think there are a few things that we need to discuss as it pertains to this resolution. First of all, this is entirely a framing issue, and it depends on which lens you want to look at this issue through. The issue that I think everybody should be most concerned with is pertaining to how is the university controlling the student activity fund? Because in every instance that we can publicly see, every instance that we have been told about, every instance that we've been into, some sort of public, announcements or anything of that nature, the student activity fund is solely handled by the finance board under the supervision of the Student Government Association. That is where this issue lies. The issue does not lie with COVID-19. Even if it did lie with COVID-19, the finance board still has the power and the authority to dictate how they wish to spend their own money. They discussed how they were under no influence of the university as it pertains to their own policy. But, that being said, they decided to make their own policy anyway, which by all means, good for them. They are more than welcome to make said policy. But I'd encourage everybody, every senator, every voting member, every person that takes a part in this to look deeply into the resolution, look at the heart of what this resolution is attacking. Are we going to stand by, and are we going to let the university take control over money that is rightfully ours, money that in every instance publicly available is said to be ours? And when are we going to not let them control this anymore? Because if we let them control this, then what's the next step? When are they going to, take this for their next big project or their next big renovation of some on-campus building? This is money that we chose to spend. The fee specifically says it is handled by the students and for the students. Where does it stop? Make sure it stays in the hands of the student government and does not go in the hands of anywhere else.
Okay, thank you, Derek. Next we have Ben Barber. Sorry.
Hey, all. So as president of SGA, it's kind of my responsibility to sort of manage how SGA interacts with other bodies within the university. It's interacting with the administration, with OCL, with all the other departments on campus, and making sure that SGA is well represented and advocating for itself within those spaces. And part of how we maintain our independence and our respect for our decision making is by remaining a respectable and dependable partner within university governance. The COVID guidelines and our support of COVID initiatives over the last year has built up a tremendous amount of respect for SGA. Our creation of the COVID study days, the pass-fail policies have built a lot of respect with UFC and the administration for initiatives SGA wants to follow. A resolution like this, to me, deeply undercuts that. This is us throwing sand in the face of the administration saying, we're going to be independent, we're going to do what we want. When sitting in on a semester's worth of finance board meetings, I have not seen the university directly interfering with those decisions. This seems like a solution in search of a problem, and I do not support this. This seems like the wrong way to approach this problem. If we have problems with limitations the university is trying to implement with the SAF, we should try to resolve those diplomatically prior to passing a resolution attempting to just dramatically fix the problem. So if this is an issue we deeply feel like we need to address, we should be addressing it, but we shouldn't be addressing it with this resolution as a first step. This is the last sanction, not the first sanction.
Okay. Next we have Naeem.
Okay, so at least from what I'm gathering here is that, specifically regarding our access to the SAF, many have said that, we are not being restricted. We still have access to the SAF. I think one point here that we should at least acknowledge is the fact that, there is some restriction that is being brought upon us regarding how we can allocate those funds that we wouldn't normally have. And right now, it's at least the argument is that's not a fair restriction just because the day is August 2nd, and that's what the university decided to choose. My only worry is what if we have another situation similar to this one in the future, where the university also has decided, we're going to make this day the big day. Something happens, we have to drastically change things. Certain things go offline. The SAF use is altered, and we are restricted to resuming normal operation until the university, assigns a day for that, and that causes an inconvenience to us and other orgs at that time. At least I guess I want to hear further discussion, but that's what's on my mind right now.
Okay, thank you for that, Naeem. We'll go to Devin.
Yeah, so Ben made a lot of my points, but so like Derek said, this is very much screams knee-jerk reaction to me, and we need to. This is the SAF cannot exist entirely in a vacuum, and it only exists as a collaboration with the university, not separately, given it is their money. And I do understand that diplomatic approaches to this may not have gotten very far. However, I think the solution, instead of completely saying, no, you can't touch our money, should have been, hey, perhaps instead of introducing a bill or whatever to say, hey, it's us now, there should have been something more of, we need to adjust this specific policy we have issue, not the entire basis of the SAF. Because as of right now, I think this radically changes, if not the actual utility of the SAF, at minimum the perception of the SAF, which is, I think, the biggest issue. And also, Derek kind of tried to play the slippery slope early, like, oh no, if we give them money, if we give them access to our thing, suddenly they're going to be taking out money for their own stuff. There has been no indication that that is at all happening or is all even be considering happening. As such, I find it a little disingenuous to have that kind of argument when there is absolutely no indication that the university wants to use it for their own purposes. They just simply want to apply the policy they already put in stone, put in writing to everyone. We can adjust that policy. We should not try and adjust the entire relationship we have with the university just because we disagree with a singular policy.
Okay. One thing I'd like to clarify that the SAF is taken out with our fee money. Just a heads up. I know you referenced that a few times, but Lucy.
Yeah, kind of touching on Naeem's point. I think that since the SAF is supposed to be more accessible after August 2nd, And then kind of going off of what Devin and Ben said as well, like it seems a little bit much to kind of put forth a resolution for only like a month. And also like I know that SIG-EP, like you guys are looking at like whatever conference, but for other student orgs that maybe have conferences over the summer, I think it might be harder for them to be able to actually use this money like for a summer conference or summer event or something because it is such a short notice. So given the short notice and also um, like August 2nd is not that far away, I feel like maybe a resolution might not have been like the best way to go about this.
Fran, do you have your hand up first? If not, we'll go to Derek. Okay, Derek.
Okay, cool. So I would like to address a few of the things that were mentioned in the past few minutes. So there were several things that were kind of alluded to here. First of all, we need to strictly address whether or not this is our money versus the university's money. We're paying into a fund. It is a separate fund, separate from tuition, separate from student services, separate from everything like that. It is for student activities and it is to be handled by the finance board. There should not be any sort of debate over that. That is what all of the policies say. That is what everything says. It is the university money. It is not the university money. It is the finance board money. It is our money. Referring back to the chat, there has been a little bit of discussion as to whether or not the university is attempting to like embezzle or take any of like the SAF or anything like that, especially pertaining to like that slippery slope argument that I was discussing earlier. I was speaking with a member of finance board earlier that did allude to the fact that the university has tried to come forward and ask and request some of the surplus money that has been found within the SAF over the past few years, and they have been trying to use some of that money for separate purposes. I don't know the whole story behind that, not trying to start any rumors or any speculation. Just know it's not that far of a reach for something like that to happen if they're trying to do something for the university. The last thing that I would like to say is everybody is sitting here saying that this is a knee-jerk reaction. This is the first thing that we tried to do to solve this problem. By no means is that the case. I've been around student government way too long to know this is not the first thing that you try to get something done. This is the very last thing that you try to get something done. We went through finance board. We went through 3 or 4 levels of the university governance to try to address this issue, talking back and forth since I believe mid to late April. So I guess it'd be 2 to 2.5 months at this point that we've tried to go about this conversation, and it's gotten us nowhere. We've come to this because we believe that the university is extending control over something that they don't rightfully have control over. We are a separate institution from the university. We as student government have a responsibility to ensure we are representing the students to the best of our ability. And that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to make sure that students are represented and that organizations are getting the funding that they are attempting to request. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make sure that everybody is represented, and we're trying to make sure that people are able to have the money that they need to host the events that they want to host. And if we want to get to one extra additional point, which really is kind of a sidetrack at this point, the university has hosted a plethora of events that they have previously deemed non-essential. We're talking about events that take place on a massive scale involving lots and lots of students in person, all of these other things that would normally be deemed non-essential under the current university policy, but they're being held anyway. The same policy that covers university travel as well. That's where we're at here. It's kind of hypocritical. It's kind of going back and forth here, and that's kind of where we're at this point. And Devin, specific examples of what?
Specific examples of these big events that you talk about the what you consider overreach.
Sure. Under university policy, as it pertains to non-essential spending, we're talking about like MTCC Late Night, which hosted a ton of people outside of COVID restrictions and guidelines and things like that. We're talking about was it the Juneteenth barbecue? There was Pride Week events, not that on its face value there's anything wrong with these events. I'm totally for them. But the thing is, they do fall under that non-essential spending category, which is the same justification the university is using for denying a lot of these budgets, or preventing finance board from allocating a lot of these budgets in the first place. Just it's not adding up.
Okay, thank you for that. Rachel.
Hi, I just wanted to clarify because I don't want to start a rumor about what's going on with that money. So the SAF currently has $600,000 in it. The university was just seeing if the SAF wanted to donate any of that money back to any specific program at the university that they would give it to. They did not they didn't say you need to give it to us. It just was a question. It would have been a nice thing. That's just, a question that they had. So that's just one thing. And I know that we said it's probably going to be a no, though. Just, you're welcome to ask, but it's probably going to be no. One other thing about the spending. So the whole university is on a spending freeze. The only money that has been able to be spent over this 6 months is the SAF. So like there are departments that like aren't buying pencils, like things that are like ridiculous that they need. So we are certainly spending that money. And then one more clarification. Yeah, late night was union boards like funding, and Juneteenth was actually Chartwell's funded that for you guys, that special meal. So that was not our funding. That was a nice thing of Chartwell's to do.
Okay, thank you.
I just don't want rumors about like money, but hopefully that clarifies.
Yeah, thank you for that, Rachel. Chloe.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up because I was in the meetings with Rachel and everyone else from admin. And to clarify on what Derek had mentioned, the university had asked for a certain amount of money, but that was only because they had assumed at the time when I was meeting with them that the remainder of the SAF that we didn't spend was just going to disappear, like ghosts. Like they thought we had to spend it all. They didn't know it rolled over. So they had asked, hey, if it doesn't roll over, are there some investments you want to make in the university or maybe a potential donation? And I had told them it did roll over. And I said I would bring it up to the board. But there was never like a finance board, you have to do this. And it's definitely not something finance board would even do on our own. It would be probably a university-wide decision given that it's your guys' money. So yeah, just another clarification on that because I don't want that to become like a rumor.
Okay, thank you for that, Chloe. Fran.
So we're like continuing forward. And at least I personally like don't really see the line here between like malicious motives and us just like spending the money as we have been. Um, Again, like COVID's been a big thing. We're moving like towards getting out of that. We have had like different like smaller events that have been like some people to be able to like give that opportunity out to like to orgs. So I really feel like this is it's being portrayed like a COVID issue and everything but what's being said that it is, right? So if that's the case, I'd really like to see like, again, talking these, I don't know, I feel like there's allegations being brought forward, obviously, on like things that like basically could have been clarified by like sitting down and like having a discussion, and inquiring more about it. But I feel like this is a very odd way of like displaying like a defense for a piece of legislation with like the the odd slandering of like the like other people here in our like sorry in our organization. Like it feels kind of like odd that this is how we're going about it versus like again just talking it out.
Okay, thank you for that. We're going to go to Derek.
Okay, thank you for that. And I will make this brief. This will be the last time that I probably speak tonight. Again, this is not intended to be an attack on any singular person or even try to suggest that there's like some major power grab by the university or any individuals in the university or anything of that nature. But again, this is intended to be a resolution that is strictly highlighting the overreach by the institution at large as it pertains specifically to the control over the student activity fund. We don't think it's really a controversial thing to say that students should have control over a fund that is specifically designed and designated for them. Not trying to say that like anybody's trying to specifically steal this money, but there are some implications here that are a little bit concerning as to whether or not this money just kind of disappears or what happens to it. Ultimately, we want to make sure everybody's represented. We want to make sure that like this money is actually being used for something good and something engaging, something that students are going to get something out of, and hopefully bring back to the institution for something that is good. Again, there are no COVID concerns by way of the university, nothing of that nature. It's simply a particular date that was chosen by the institution that they are specifically sticking to. So in any case, I really hope you guys decide to vote on this resolution. I know it's been a controversial night. It's especially been a long one. It's already been an hour and a half. So again, please consider voting on this. And hopefully you guys are willing to represent students in the way that we think is most fit. So anyways, thank you guys.
Okay, thank you for that, Naeem. Or I'm sorry. Yeah, it is Naeem.
Oh, okay. At least, so there's something confusing here. And I've heard a lot of statements saying that university, that they are separate from control of the SAF fund, that, there is this barrier between what the university can say and do, and how we can spend that money, and that money is rightfully ours because we pay directly into it for it to be used for our events. I guess my question is, if that's the case, then how did we end up here? Because it seems to me something must have slipped through the cracks where some restriction managed to find its way down to org travel, and somehow that's still being stopped despite the fact that we have events and so on. So I'm not exactly, so what I'm trying to say is some further insulation maybe wouldn't be a bad thing for us to ensure that we have control over the SAF fund, because I'm just a little bit confused as to how it is we managed to get to this situation if what everyone said is true and we actually do have full control. Something apparently has escaped us or gone past us or snuck by. If August 2nd, if org still can't, get past the August 2nd date, and this can't be discussed, any further on an individual basis.
Okay, thank you for that, Naeem. Alec?
Hey, just as a note on the side of this, and as of hearing everything that everyone's had to say over this discussion, I just wanted to make it clear, the intents of this proposition aren't in bad practice, nor are they in bad intent. I find them more to be more constructive and iterative to inform both ourselves as well as the future generations of SGA members that this is how we run, this is our funding, it comes from the students for the students, and it's just setting a simple barrier line to outline our control over it and to not be tampered with via personal agendas. And that's the entire, I guess, point of this bill. And that's, if I am mistaken, correct me, but to me, that's what it is to me. And I feel it would be better to pass it than to not, because then it leaves that line vague, blurry, interpretable. And so it might cause problems for people in the future. And so I see this bill as more constructive than it is destructive or as a hazard. If everyone believes against it, I understand, but I am voting for this and I hope you will too.
With that being said, our 10 minutes is up. If there's any more motions to extend, I'll entertain them now. Otherwise, I would say it is time to move to voting. So I'm gonna have Joel release the form. You guys now have the next 10-ish minutes to vote. If not, your vote will not be counted. That's kind of how we're doing votes now, by the way. We kind of started this at the last meeting. I already started the timer, so please vote, and hopefully we will get something in at the end of the night. And during this time, I also have a couple announcements. Like mentioned earlier before the meeting, we are going to have another session in July. The date will be released shortly. And before that, I have a form I will be releasing at the end of this meeting for committees. The committee form to fill out is due by next Wednesday, so you guys get a week. Committees are first come, first serve. So you guys will be put on the committee you assigned. But once your committee that you want's full, then it's full and it moves to your second choice. All of the descriptions of the committees are on the form. And if you have any questions, reach out to me or any of the people on eBoard. Yes, I will keep that in mind, Lucy, and releasing it 2 weeks in advance. I know that this is a special session and not everyone could attend. So anyways, this was a fun time. I liked it. It was lively, getting back into the swing of things.
Hey, Kiru, voting channel. I can't seem to find it in the Slack unless I have to get new permissions for it.
It should be in the Slack.
Is it labeled voting or is it something else this time?
Senate voting.
Senate voting. I see Senate agendas and Senate general.
Maybe
I don't have anything else.
I would ask Joel then.
Oh, Joel, I need permissions.
Hey, Alec. Were you confirmed as a senator last semester?
Yeah, last term as well as I renewed it this semester.
Okay, that might have been a mistake on my part. I'm going to go back through the presentations and make 100% certain of that. And Kiro, if it would be all right with you if I do find out that he was confirmed, could he have extended voting time?
Yes.
All right. Just wanting to make sure that everything is a-okay.
You're fine. I'd rather Senate be smooth than anything else.
Also, if you don't mind me asking, how many new senators do we have this time around?
We have quite a lot of new senators. A lot of first-time senators, or maybe second time. I just got done with my first year, so I'm not really sure what year the rest of senators are.
That's okay. I mean, I was just looking around, and since he was part of the discussion, I'll bring him up. Devin, nice to meet you. I don't believe I've had the pleasure to meet you yet, but welcome. Welcome to SGA. I hope you're enjoying it so far, all the heated debates.
Thank you. And my pronouns are she, her. Thank you.
Of course. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Alec, I am not seeing you as a reconfirmed senator, actually.
That's a problem then.
Yes.
Yeah. that does-
Historically, Alec, which seat did you occupy? Because I don't believe you stood for election in the last round of Senate voting.
We need a couple more people to vote, by the way, so feel free to do that.
What do you mean by seat, Ben? You mean
So like there are like the college seats, the at-large seats, the special interest seats for certain organizations.
He was architecture.
Yeah,
Okay.
architecture.
I believe we confirmed Kira, didn't we confirm someone at the last meeting to fill the architecture seat?
Yes.
That was Lucy, right? Okay, because yeah, nobody had stood for nobody had put their name forward during the actual Senate elections for architecture, and right after the election, Lucy asked if there would be an open seat. So Lucy is currently holding the architecture seat. I believe there are still additional at-large seats that need to be filled. So if you would like to return to the Senate, talk to Kiru about filling one of those at-large seats.
Yes, we do have a couple. I'll talk more about that at our July meeting. Nabia, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I have to go. Is that okay? I have to
Oh,
leave.
yeah, you're fine.
Okay. Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay. I think. Okay. A majority of people here have voted. So with that, I will announce that it did pass. So you guys are free to go now, and I will end the live show. Oh, actually, wait. I need a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Seconded, thirded, and fourted.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor of adjourning this meeting?
Aye.
Aye, Captain.
Opposed?
Nay, Captain.
Nay, perfect. With that, the meeting is now done.